my stepson destroyed my career with a prank. Then my wife called me petty for kicking him out, and now my marriage is hanging by a thread. I still feel the tension when I think about that day. My wife Karen and I have been married for 5 years. She has a son, Dylan, from a previous relationship, and while we've never been super close, I've always treated him like my own. I even helped him financially through college. When Dylan graduated recently, he moved back in with us while he searched for a job. At first, it was fine. He's a smart, funny kid, but things started to change. He began hanging out with some new friends, ones he said were into pranks. I didn't think much of it, but looking back, I should have seen the red flags. A couple of weeks ago, Karen went out of town to visit her sister, leaving Dylan and me alone in the house. The morning of my big work presentation, one I had spent weeks meticulously preparing for, I walked into my home office and froze. My laptop, my files, even my chair, everything was wrapped tightly in layers of duct tape. At first, I thought I was seeing things. Then it hit me. Dylan. He came out of his room laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Gotcha," he said, beaming with pride. My heart sank. I didn't have time for this. I was minutes away from a presentation that could make or break a major project. I frantically tried peeling off the tape, but it was stuck on like glue. Some of my files ripped in the process, and I could feel the stress boiling over. I confronted Dylan, demanding to know why he thought this was okay. He just shrugged and said, "It's just a joke, chill out." I couldn't believe it. My work, my livelihood was just a joke to him? I told him flat out that this wasn't funny, that I needed him to take my job and our home seriously. But instead of apologizing, he rolled his eyes and acted like I was the one overreacting. When Karen got back a few days later, I laid it all out. I told her what had happened and how disrespected I felt. I told her that I couldn't live with someone who would jeopardize my work and then laugh about it. Karen tried to smooth things over, saying Dylan didn't mean any harm, but I had made up my mind. I told Dylan he had to move out. He left that same day, going to stay with a friend. He did apologize later, but I told him that actions have consequences and that he needed to learn this lesson the hard way. Now Karen is furious. She says I'm being too harsh, that Dylan is just a kid who made a dumb mistake. She thinks I'm putting my pride above family, but I can't shake the feeling that this isn't about pride. It's about respect. Am I the one who's wrong here? Should I let him move back in, or was I right to draw the line? Update 1. After a lot of heated conversations and tense silences in the house, things have only gotten more complicated. Karen and I are still at odds over Dylan moving out, and honestly, it feels like the tension between us is growing by the day. She keeps insisting that I overreacted, that Dylan was just being immature and didn't mean any harm. I, on the other hand, feel like I've already compromised so much since we got married, and this is one situation where I couldn't back down. But here's the thing. After Dylan apologized, I actually started to feel guilty. Maybe I was too harsh? Maybe I could have handled it better instead of making him leave right away. I've been sitting with that guilt for a while, but every time I think about it, I remember his reaction when I confronted him. The laughing, the dismissal, the way he acted like I was crazy for being upset. That's what sticks with me. He didn't just make a mistake. He didn't take responsibility until he realized he was facing real consequences. Karen doesn't see it that way, though. She thinks I'm too rigid and that I blew a small issue into a full-blown crisis. She also keeps reminding me that Dylan's her son, that he's family, and that family is supposed to forgive each other. I agree, family should forgive each other, but forgiveness doesn't mean there shouldn't be accountability, right? She doesn't seem to get that distinction. What's making it worse is that she started to bring up old arguments that I thought we had settled a long time ago. She's throwing things at me like, "You never treat Dylan like he's truly yours," and "You're always harder on him because he's not your biological kid." I'll admit I've been strict with him at times, but it's not because he's not my kid, it's because I believe in holding him to a certain standard. I supported him through college, didn't I? I helped him out whenever he needed it. I thought I was doing everything right as a stepdad, but now it feels like all of that's been erased because of this one fight. On Dylan's end, things seem to be fine. He's been staying with a friend, and from what I've heard through Karen, he's still job hunting. He's apologized again, this time through text, saying he didn't mean to disrespect me and that he now realizes how his actions affected me. I appreciate the apology, but part of me wonders if he's only saying it because he wants to move back in. Am I wrong for feeling that way? I don't want to be cynical, but after the way he dismissed my feelings the first time, I'm finding it hard to trust that his apology is sincere. Karen, of course, thinks this apology is the final word and that Dylan should come back home immediately. She keeps asking, "What more do you want from him?" Honestly, I don't even know how to answer that anymore. I don't think it's about wanting more from Dylan. I just need to know that this won't happen again. That he actually respects the boundaries and expectations we have in our house. The worst part is how this whole situation has started to affect my relationship with Karen. We've been snapping at each other over the smallest things lately, and it feels like this issue with Dylan has opened up a bigger rift between us. I feel like she's prioritizing Dylan's feelings over mine, while she feels like I'm being too rigid and unwilling to compromise. Neither of us is budging, and it's exhausting. A couple of days ago, Karen suggested family therapy. At first, I wasn't sure how to feel about that. I've never done therapy before, and the idea of airing our personal issues to a stranger felt weird, but now I'm starting to think it might be the only way to move forward. We clearly aren't communicating well, and maybe having a neutral third party could help us figure out where we're going wrong. Dylan, on the other hand, wasn't thrilled when Karen brought up the idea to him. He said he didn't think therapy was necessary and that it felt like making a bigger deal out of nothing. I can't say I'm surprised by his reaction, but it's frustrating because I feel like he's missing the point. This isn't just about him, it's about the dynamic between all of us and how we handle conflicts as a family. I also can't shake this nagging feeling that Karen's suggestion for therapy is less about actually solving the problem and more about finding a way to convince me to let Dylan move back in. Maybe that's unfair of me to think, but after weeks of her pushing me to let him come home, it's hard not to be skeptical. At this point, I'm torn. Part of me wants to stand my ground and stick to my original decision. Dylan needs to learn that actions have consequences. But another part of me wonders if keeping him out of the house is doing more harm than good. Karen's angry, Dylan's distant, and I'm stuck in the middle trying to figure out if I made the right call. Was I too harsh? Should I have given him a second chance sooner? Or is this just one of those situations where there's no right answer, only compromises that leave everyone feeling a little bitter? This whole situation is weighing on me more than I expected it to. I didn't realize how much this would ripple out and affect everything, my marriage, my peace of mind, even how I see my role as a stepdad. I want to do what's best for the family, but I honestly don't know what that is anymore. Update 2. Things have taken an even bigger turn, and I feel like I'm walking on a tightrope that's about to snap. Karen and I went ahead with the family therapy idea, even though Dylan wasn't exactly thrilled about it. The first session was awkward. The therapist asked us to lay everything out, so I explained my side. The stress Dylan's prank caused, the lack of respect I felt, and why I thought it was important for him to understand the consequences of his actions. Dylan, to my surprise, admitted that the prank was a bad idea. He even said he hadn't realized how serious it was until he saw how upset I was. But then he added something that threw me off. He said, "I didn't think you'd care so much because you've always been pretty distant." That hit me like a punch to the gut. When I asked him what he meant by distant, he said I'm not as emotionally open with him as I am with Karen, and that I've always kept him at arm's length. He said he doesn't feel like I really want him in the house, and that's why he thought it was okay to mess around. It wasn't really my space in his mind. I was stunned. I thought I'd been doing everything right, supporting him financially, giving him advice, making sure he had what he needed. I didn't realize he felt like I was keeping him at a distance. Karen chimed in, saying she's noticed it too, but she never brought it up because she didn't want to make things harder for me. I didn't even know how to respond to that. Am I emotionally distant? Have I been failing at this stepdad role without even realizing it? The therapist suggested that Dylan might have acted out with a prank because he was looking for attention or a way to connect, even if it was in an immature and misguided way. That hit me hard. I've been so focused on making sure Dylan had a good foundation for his future, college, job hunting, a roof over his head, that I might have neglected the emotional side of our relationship. But then, just when I started feeling guilty, Dylan said something else that made me see red. He said, I don't know why you're making such a big deal about me moving back. It's not like I asked to be here in the first place. Excuse me? Not asked to be here? After all the times I supported him, all the things I've done to help him out, that's how he sees it? I bit my tongue in the moment, but later I couldn't stop replaying those words in my head. It made me feel like no matter what I do, it'll never be enough for him to see me as someone who actually cares. After the session, Karen and I had another long conversation. She apologized for not bringing up her concerns sooner and admitted that she's been struggling to balance her loyalty to Dylan with her loyalty to me. She said she feels like she's stuck between her son and her husband, and no matter what she does, she's letting someone down. I told her I get it, I really do, but that doesn't make it any easier to deal with. One thing she said that really stuck with me is that she feels like I'm holding on to this situation with Dylan as a way to assert control over our household. She said it's not just about the prank or the respect. It's about me wanting to feel like my voice matters in the dynamic between the three of us. I don't know if that's true, but it's given me a lot to think about. As for Dylan, he's still staying with his friend, but Karen has been visiting him regularly. She's even started helping him out financially again, which frustrates me because I feel like we're undermining the very lesson I wanted him to learn. How is he supposed to grow up and take responsibility if we're constantly bailing him out? The therapist suggested we do individual sessions alongside the family ones to work on our own feelings and perspectives. I'm honestly considering it. This situation has made me question so much about myself, how I handle relationships, how I communicate, even how I approach being a stepdad. I thought I was doing the right thing by being firm and setting boundaries, but now I'm wondering if I've been too rigid. At the same time, I can't shake the feeling that Dylan still doesn't fully understand the impact of what he did. He says the right things in therapy, but his attitude outside of it still feels off. He's polite but distant, apologetic but not genuinely engaged. It's like he's going through the motions because he knows that's what Karen and the therapist want to see. Karen, on the other hand, is pushing harder than ever for Dylan to move back in. She says he's learned his lesson, that he understands now, and that keeping him out of the house is doing more harm than good. I told her I'm not ready for that yet. I need to see real change from Dylan before I can feel comfortable living under the same roof again. She accused me of holding a grudge, and honestly, maybe I am. But is that so wrong when the person you're forgiving doesn't seem to fully respect you? This whole situation feels like a no-win scenario. If I let Dylan move back, I'm worried he'll see it as me caving and that nothing will really change. But if I keep holding my ground, I risk driving a wedge even deeper between me and Karen. I love her, but I also need her to understand that this isn't just about Dylan anymore. It's about the foundation of our marriage and whether or not we respect each other's boundaries and feelings. And the next therapy session is coming up soon, and I honestly don't know what to expect. I feel like everything is teetering on the edge, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep walking this line. Update 3. It's been a whirlwind since my last post, and I think I can finally put this whole saga to rest, though not without some serious shifts in my life. Buckle up because a lot has happened. After the second therapy session, I decided to take the therapist's advice and try individual counseling. I wasn't sure at first if it would help, but honestly, it gave me the clarity I desperately needed. The therapist helped me unpack a lot of my feelings about Dylan, Karen, and my role in this blended family. One big thing that came up: I've been carrying a lot of resentment, not just from the prank, but from years of small things that built up. Times when I felt like Karen undermined me, or when Dylan acted like I was more of an ATM than a parent figure. I thought I'd let those moments go, but clearly they were still festering under the surface. The biggest realization, though, was how much I'd tied my sense of respect in the household to Dylan's actions. I'd been so focused on setting boundaries and teaching him a lesson that I didn't stop to think about whether I was doing it in a way that was actually productive. I realized I was less angry about the prank itself and more about what it represented to me: a lack of acknowledgement for everything I've done to support him. Meanwhile, Karen had her own individual sessions, and to her credit, she really took them seriously. She admitted to me later that she'd been so focused on protecting Dylan because of guilt over his dad not being in the picture, that she often ignored how her actions affected me. That was a huge moment for us. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we were finally on the same page about where things went wrong. Dylan came to the next family session with a completely different attitude. He said the therapy had been eye-opening for him, too. He finally admitted that the prank wasn't just a joke. He'd been testing boundaries because he felt unsure of his place in the house. He said he'd always seen me as mom's husband, more than a father figure, and didn't know how to bridge that gap. Hearing him say that made me realize just how disconnected we'd both been. I thought I was doing enough by supporting him financially and giving him advice, but I hadn't done much to build an emotional connection. I own that now. We also tackled the elephant in the room, him moving back in. Karen was still pushing for it, but this time, Dylan spoke up first. He said he wasn't ready to come back just yet, not because he didn't want to, but because he wanted to prove he could stand on his own first. That blew me away. It was the first time he'd taken full accountability for the situation, and I could tell he was serious. He said he'd stay with his friend a little longer, focus on his job hunt, and come back when he felt like he could contribute to the household in a more mature way. I agreed. I told him the door was open whenever he was ready, as long as we all worked on improving how we communicate and respect each other. Karen wasn't thrilled at first, but after we talked more, she admitted that it might be the best path forward. We needed some space to heal before jumping back into living together. Fast forward a few weeks, and things have genuinely improved. Dylan found a part-time job, and while it's not his dream career, it's a start. He's been texting me more often, not just to check in, but to actually share parts of his life. It's a small step, but it feels meaningful. Karen and I have also been working on our marriage. Therapy helped us see how much we've been operating on parallel tracks, rather than as a team, and we're trying to fix that. We've set clearer boundaries around how we handle disagreements about Dylan, and it's already made a difference. And that Dylan hasn't moved back in yet, but he's been visiting regularly, and the dynamic feels healthier now. There's still work to do, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're all moving in the right direction. It's been a tough journey, but I think this situation forced all of us to confront things we'd been avoiding for years. So, was I the asshole for kicking Dylan out? Maybe, maybe not. What I do know is that it wasn't just about the prank. It was about respect, communication, and understanding each other's roles in this blended family. We're all learning, and while we've made mistakes, I'm hopeful for the future. Thanks to everyone who weighed in, whether you agreed with me or called me out, your perspectives helped me see things I might have missed.